Imagine being the girl no one notices. The one whose words are always ignored. The one whose name people don't even remember. That was Alec. A simple nanny. But then came the day when she suddenly found herself standing in a boardroom where a $300 million crisis was unfolding. The room was filled with fear, tension, and above all, arrogance. Older executives in expensive suits were desperately trying to save their reputation, their company, their power. Yet the answer was right in front of them, and none of them could see it. Except Alec. Her heart was pounding. Her hands were slightly shaking. But she chose to step forward. A voice that had been silent for years suddenly became the strongest voice in the room. The moment she explained the truth, the entire room fell silent. The chairman looked at her. The executive's eyes widened. Someone even forgot to breathe. No one ever expected that the girl who always stood in the background would be the one to save $300 million. But she did it. And what happened after that didn't just change the boardroom. It changed the definition of value. A voice that was never respected redefined what worth truly means. Can a quiet girl really shake the world when she speaks despite her fear? Alec answered that question. And she changed everything.
I never imagined I'd be telling a story like this. Honestly, I'm still trying to process everything that happened, even now, as I speak. It feels unreal, like I stepped into someone else's life, someone far wealthier and more powerful than me. And yet, somehow, I became the center of a moment that no one could have predicted. I remember the morning like it was yesterday. The sun was barely up, and the city outside my window was still shaking off sleep. I had just arrived at my temporary office space in the CEO's skyscraper, James's office, the one that everyone said was untouchable, reserved for the top executives who controlled millions of dollars every day. And me? I was supposed to be invisible, just the nanny who handled the small things, the one nobody noticed. I walked through the polished floors, hearing the faint click of my shoes echoing against the marble. My bag felt heavier than usual, not with my things, but with the tension in the air. Something wasn't right. The assistants rushed past, murmuring to each other, and the usual calm order of the office felt like it was cracking just a little. I could feel it in my chest, the way the pressure of unspoken problems hung over everyone. But I told myself to breathe, to focus on what I knew I could do. That's all I had. What I knew, what I could see, what I could fix. James was already there, seated behind his massive desk, looking every bit the part of a man who carried more responsibility than anyone should. He sipped his coffee, scanning through papers, the sunlight catching on his gold watch. Everything about him screamed control, but there was something in his eyes that morning I hadn't seen before. Something tense, restless, like he could sense that something huge was about to happen and didn't know where to start. The executives started streaming in, one by one, each carrying folders, tablets, and laptops.
Their faces were tight with concentration, eyes darting between charts and projections, murmuring under their breath. And yet, even in all this chaos, I noticed the little things, the tiny errors hidden in reports, the assumptions they were making, the details they were missing. And suddenly, it hit me. If this wasn't noticed soon, it could cost the company. No, it could cost millions. I swallowed hard. I knew I had to do something. At first, I hesitated. I reminded myself I was just the nanny. Who was I to step into the world of billion-dollar decisions? But then I thought about the faces of the people who depended on this company, the employees whose lives could be turned upside down by one overlooked mistake. I couldn't ignore it. My hands trembled slightly as I approached the desk, holding the single folder that contained the key to the solution. My heartbeat felt loud, pounding in my ears louder than the chatter around me. I cleared my throat softly, and that tiny noise seemed to echo through the room. Every conversation stopped. Every pair of eyes turned to me. I felt my stomach twist in anxiety. Some of the executives raised eyebrows. Some smirked, probably thinking I was about to embarrass myself. James looked up, and for the first time, I saw something different in his expression. A flicker of curiosity, a crack in his usual composed demeanor. Then I opened the folder, and I started pointing out the errors, the tiny, overlooked details, the hidden problem that no one else had noticed. I could feel the tension tighten around me, like the room itself was holding its breath. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours as I worked through the problem. I spoke slowly, carefully, but also with urgency, because every second mattered. The executives whispered, some nervously, some in disbelief. I could see the shock on their faces as the pieces started to make sense. Jamer S. leaned forward, his hand on the edge of the desk, eyes widening slightly. I could feel his heartbeat through the energy in the room, the silent acknowledgement that what I was doing mattered, and that it was extraordinary. And still, the pressure didn't let up. I could see skepticism lurking in some corners, the kind of doubt that comes from people who are used to power and privilege. But I kept going. I had to, because if I didn't, no one else would. By the time I finished, silence had completely taken over. It wasn't just quiet. It was a kind of awe, a collective pause where everyone realized what had just happened. I let my hands fall to my sides, and I could feel sweat dampening the back of my neck. My chest heaved, not from exertion, but from the overwhelming mix of fear and relief. I had done it. I had solved a problem that could have cost $300 million. But even as relief began to creep in, I knew the moment wasn't over. James finally spoke, his voice low but steady. How did you do this? It wasn't anger. It wasn't doubt. It was disbelief, mixed with something deeper, something I would never forget. Respect. The room stayed frozen, everyone waiting for him to say more, to react, to decide what would happen next. And in that instant, I realized that this wasn't just about the numbers or the money. It was about recognition, about breaking assumptions, about showing that someone like me, someone invisible to most, could make a difference in a world that often overlooked people like me. The tension lingered, thick in the air. I could feel the eyes of everyone on me, some judging, some questioning, some in silent admiration. And in that moment, I knew life as I had known it was about to change. This was just the beginning, the turning point, and whatever happened next would leave an impact far beyond the office walls. I could feel the weight of the room pressing down on me, but for the first time, I also felt a strange scent, sea of power. Power that wasn't about money or status, but about truth and clarity. James was staring at me like I had just revealed some impossible secret. The executives shifted uneasily, whispering behind their hands, and I could almost hear their thoughts. Who is she to do this? How did she know? I tried to steady my breathing, reminding myself that I had done what I had to do. But even as relief started to seep in, I sensed the storm was far from over. James finally pushed back from his desk and ran a hand through his hair, his eyes fixed on the folder I was holding. This is incredible, he muttered, almost to himself. The words weren't loud, but they carried a weight that made everyone stop moving, stop whispering. I could feel the room holding its breath. Some of the executives looked skeptical, their lips pressed tight as if they were struggling to process that someone like me, someone they had ignored, dismissed, and overlooked,
had just outshone all their combined experience. I wanted to say something, to explain myself, but the words felt stuck in my throat. Instead, I just stood there, my hands still trembling slightly, my mind racing with every possible outcome. Would he acknowledge me openly? Would the executives accept it? Or would I just fade back into the background again, my efforts unnoticed, as if it had never happened? Then came the whispers. Not just from the executives, but from some of the assistants and interns who had witnessed the entire thing. "She actually did it," one of them muttered. "I can't believe it," another added, shaking her head in disbelief. The murmurs grew louder, spreading across the room like wildfire. And suddenly, I realized that this moment wasn't just about James or the company. It was about me. My ability to act, to think, to solve had been tested, and I had passed. But that realization didn't stop the tension. A few executives finally found their voices. One of them, older, with a sharp tone that cut through the room, said, "Are you seriously telling us a nanny solved a problem worth $300 million? This is preposterous." I could feel a flush of anger rise in me, but I kept my voice calm when I replied, "I understand it's hard to believe, but the numbers don't lie. The error was here, here, and here." I gestured to the pages, explaining each detail, each step I had taken. The room was silent again, but this time, the silence carried grudging acknowledgement. James leaned back in his chair, his eyes narrowing thoughtfully. I could see the gears turning in his mind, weighing the implications of what had just happened. He wasn't just impressed. He was recalculating everything he thought he knew about the people around him. And maybe, just maybe, he was realizing that skill and intelligence weren't tied to titles, clothes, or status. As the minutes ticked by, the tension began to shift. Some executives reluctantly nodded, their pride bruised but their respect growing. Others still resisted, whispering and exchanging skeptical glances. And through it all, I stood in the center of the storm, feeling a mix of fear, pride, and disbelief. I had done something extraordinary, but the hardest part was yet to come. Recognition is never given freely, and I knew that the next few moments would decide whether my contribution would be acknowledged or swept under the rug like so many others had been before. Then James spoke again, louder this time. "I need everyone to understand exactly what just happened here." His voice cut through the murmurs, sharp and commanding. This problem, worth hundreds of millions, was solved by someone many of us underestimated. And that says a lot about the way we view talent and opportunity. The room froze. Some executives' faces darkened with discomfort, while others softened with grudging admiration. I felt a strange wave of relief, but it was tinged with an anxiety. Would he actually stand by his words? Would he recognize me fully? Or was this just a temporary acknowledgement to maintain appearances? I could see that he was thinking carefully, weighing not just the numbers but the human element, the courage, focus and insight it took for me to do what no one else could. And then, it happened. James stood up, the chair scraping against the polished floor. His eyes met mine, steady and unwavering, and he said something I will never forget. "From this moment on, Alec, your talent will not be overlooked. You've proven your worth in a way that can't be ignored. I want everyone here to remember that." The room erupted, not in applause, but in stunned silence, the kind that fills the air when everyone realizes they've witnessed something extraordinary. Some executives shifted, their pride hurt, but their respect undeniable. Others looked at me with eyes that were finally seeing, really seeing, for the first time. I felt my chest tighten with emotion, a mix of relief, pride, and a kind of quiet triumph. I had faced doubt, bias, and disbelief, and I had come out the other side. But even as the tension lifted slightly, I knew this moment wasn't just about me. It was bigger than one person, one office, one company. It was about challenging assumptions, about proving that courage, intelligence, and skill can come from anyone, anywhere, even from someone overlooked and underestimated. As I looked around the room, I realized that this story, the tension, the doubt, the moment of truth, wasn't just going to end here. It would linger, not just in the minds of those present, but in the way the company operated, in the way people valued each other, in the way justice and fairness might finally begin to take root in a world that often ignored it. And yet, even in that triumph, a question hung in the air. Would recognition last? Or would the old ways quietly reassert themselves, pushing truth and talent back into the shadows? I didn't have the answer. All I knew was that, in that moment, I had done what I could, and it had changed everything. I could feel the weight of everyone's eyes on me, but it wasn't just curiosity or respect anymore. It was expectation. The moment had shifted from disbelief to a tension that felt almost unbearable. I had proven I could solve the problem, yes, but the room was now holding its breath, waiting for James to decide what would come next. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest, the blood rushing in my ears, each beat a drum of anxiety and fear. I had never been in a room like this before, and the intensity of it made my hands clammy. James stood, tall and composed, but I could see it in his eyes. The storm of thoughts, the battle between tradition, pride, and the undeniable truth of what had just happened. The executives around him shifted nervously, exchanging glances that said everything. Some were angry, some were jealous, and some were finally seeing the truth they had ignored for far too long. The air was thick with judgment and expectation, and I felt the full weight of every assumption, every stereotype, and every doubt pressing down on me at once. Then came the moment that made my stomach drop. One of the senior executives, a man who had been dismissive from the start, stepped forward, his expression sharp. Are we really saying that a nanny, someone we didn't even consider, handled a problem worth hundreds of millions? Are we seriously acknowledging this? His voice carried disbelief, but also the subtle venom of someone whose pride had been wounded. I swallowed hard, feeling a surge of both fear and determination. This was it, the moment that could undo everything or solidify it. I straightened my shoulders and held his gaze. I understand your doubt, I said, my voice steady even though my heart was racing. But the numbers don't lie. The flaw was here, here, and here, and the solution was right in front of us. You can choose to ignore it, or you can see it for what it is. I felt the words leaving my lips, but inside, my mind was spinning, hoping he wouldn't challenge me further, hoping James would intervene. James did intervene. His voice, calm but firm, cut through the tension like a knife. Enough, he said. The solution is correct. What Alec has shown us is undeniable. This is not about who we expected to solve it. This is about the truth. And the truth matters more than pride. I could see a shift in the room immediately. Some executives' faces darkened with frustration, but others relaxed, acknowledging that James had spoken with authority. I felt a flicker of relief, but it was short-lived. Because even as the room settled, a new wave of tension hit me. I realized that recognition was one thing, but acceptance was another. There were still whispers, subtle glances, the unspoken judgments of those unwilling to truly see someone like me succeed.
It wasn't just the solution to a problem anymore. It was about challenging assumptions, confronting bias, and standing firm against the invisible forces that told me I didn't belong. And then came the most intense moment. James turned fully toward me, his expression unreadable, and for a heartbeat, the room seemed to disappear. It was just the two of us, and I could feel the weight of his decision pressing down on me. The seconds stretched, each one filled with anticipation and fear. I didn't know if he would publicly acknowledge my contribution or quietly move on, leaving me invisible once again. Finally, he spoke. "Alec," he said, his voice steady but deep with emotion. "What you did today, no one else could have done it. You saw what we all missed, and you acted when no one else could. You've proven more than your skill. You've proven your courage, your insight, and your value, and I will not let that go unnoticed." The words hit me like a tidal wave. I felt tears prick at the corners of my eyes, relief and pride flooding through me. But even as I tried to process it, I could see the reactions around the room. Shock, envy, disbelief, but also something else. Respect, real, grudging respect. It was a moment of truth that couldn't be ignored. Then came the silent acknowledgement, the pause that made the impact of everything sink in. The executives finally accepted what had happened, some nodding reluctantly, others still clinging to pride but unable to deny the facts. And I realized something profound. This wasn't just about me, or the problem, or even the money. It was about breaking assumptions, challenging the ways people viewed each other, and proving that courage and intelligence can come from anyone, anywhere. For a moment, I just stood there, breathing in the weight of it all. I had faced disbelief, bias, and skepticism, and I had survived. I had turned the impossible into reality, but more importantly, I had made people see what they had refused to see before. And in that realization, I felt a mix of fear and hope. Fear because the world could still push back, and hope because change, even if small, had begun. The room was quiet now, not because the tension had disappeared, but because everyone had witnessed something extraordinary. A moment that would linger long after the office lights went out. A moment that would challenge assumptions and force reflection. And as I looked around, I felt the weight of what had happened sink in. I hadn't just solved a problem. I had stood up to a system, confronted doubt, and emerged on the other side. And yet, even in that triumph, a question remained. Would the recognition last, or would it fade into whispers and unacknowledged effort, as it had so many times before? I didn't know. All I knew was that in that instant, I had done what I could, and it had changed everything. The silence after James's words was almost deafening. I could feel every heartbeat in that room, mine especially, thundering like it might burst out of my chest. Relief washed over me, but it wasn't simple relief. It was he, Avi, layered with pride, disbelief, and an ache I hadn't realized had been there for years. I had been underestimated, ignored, and overlooked so many times in my life that moments like this felt almost unreal, like stepping into a dream that teetered on the edge of reality. I looked around at the executives. Some of them had faces that were still tight with pride, the kind of pride that doesn't die easily. But even they were quieter now. They were forced to acknowledge something they had refused to see for so long. A single person, someone considered ordinary, had changed the course of their entire company in a matter of minutes, and that person was me. I felt a warmth in my chest, but it was tempered by the weight of everything this moment represented. This wasn't just about solving a problem worth hundreds of millions. It was about trust, about seeing beyond assumptions, about recognizing the human behind the title or role. I had faced judgment, disbelief, and subtle discrimination.
and I had stood my ground. And in that standing, I realized something profound. Courage and intelligence often come from those we least expect, from those we overlook, and from those we are quick to dismiss. James finally broke the quiet again. "From this day forward," he said, his voice deliberate, calm, yet heavy with meaning, "Alec will have a voice here. Your ideas, your insight, and your judgment will be respected, not just today, but every day moving forward." The room seemed to exhale, and in that exhale, I felt a shift, not just in how I was seen, but in how the world around me could begin to see what mattered most. I wanted to cry, to scream, to laugh, all at once. My hands shook slightly as I put the folder down, my mind racing with what had just happened. Years of being underestimated suddenly felt like they had a purpose, like the struggles, the quiet moments of invisibility, and the doubts cast by others. All of it had led to this instant of undeniable truth. For the first time in a long time, I felt seen. Not just recognized for what I did, but recognized for who I was.
And yet, even in that victory, I knew the world outside the office walls would not automatically change. There would always be bias, there would always be doubt, and there would always be people unwilling to see what was right in front of them. But moments like this matter because they challenge those assumptions. They remind us that courage, skill, and brilliance are not limited by title, status, or appearance. They can come from anyone, anywhere, at any time. I glanced back at James. There was a quiet acknowledgement in his eyes, a recognition that extended beyond this office, beyond this problem. He understood that moments like this ripple outward, changing the way people think, the way people value each other, and the way human potential is recognized. And I realized that while this story was mine, it wasn't just mine. It was a story about fairness, awareness, and the courage to challenge assumptions. I think about it often now, the lessons it left behind. How many people go unseen, underestimated, dismissed, not because they lack skill or heart, but because others refuse to truly see them? How many solutions, lives, and moments are lost because the world values appearances over truth? And I ask myself, and anyone who will listen, how often do we fail to notice someone's brilliance simply because they don't fit our expectations? I don't have all the answers, but I do know this. Recognition matters, courage matters, and one person standing up, one voice speaking the truth, can make the impossible happen. It can shake assumptions, challenge bias, and change the way people think about the world. That's the lesson I want everyone to carry forward. The understanding that true value isn't measured in titles, wealth, or appearances. It's measured in insight, courage, and action. As I left that office that day, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Hope that too, the world could see beyond what is expected, beyond what is convenient, beyond what is comfortable. Hope that fairness and recognition could take root, one moment, one voice, one person at a time. And I knew, deep down, that this story wasn't just about me solving a problem. It was about a truth we all need to remember. The world is richer, stronger, and fairer when we truly see each other. So I ask you, are we willing to see people for who they are? Or will we only see them for what we think they should be? How many times have we overlooked someone's potential simply because of assumptions, bias, or doubt? These are questions that linger long after moments like this, questions that challenge us to reflect, to act, and to change. Because one day, someone's courage, insight, and truth may just change everything. And if we refuse to see it, to honor it, we all lose.
even as the applause, or maybe it was just the quiet acknowledgement, settled in the room. I couldn't stop my mind from racing. The moment had passed, yes, but the weight of it lingered in every corner, every shadow, every glance from those who had witnessed it. I could feel it in James's eyes, in the tense nods of the executives, and in the whispered awe of the assistants. It wasn't just recognition, it was something heavier, something real, something that had the power to ripple beyond that office. Walking out of that building, I felt a strange mixture of exhaustion and exhilaration. My legs were tired, my hands still trembling, but my heart felt lighter. Not because the problem was solved, not just because James had acknowledged me, but because for the first time, I felt the truth of who I was recognized. I had acted when no one else could, and in doing so, I had forced the world to pay attention, even if just for a moment. But the story didn't end at the office doors. Life outside was still the same. The city, still buzzing with its relentless rhythm. People hustled past without knowing the storm that had just unfolded within those walls. I thought about how many times someone like me, or anyone underestimated, dismissed, overlooked, faces impossible odds and never gets the chance to prove themselves. How many moments of brilliance go unseen because no one thought to look. That thought made my chest tighten. Recognition is powerful, yes, but fairness, true fairness, is rarer than most people realize. I remembered the looks from the executives, some grudging, some wide-eyed, some still skeptical. And I realized that even after today, some would forget, some would dismiss, some would pretend it never happened. But others would carry it with them. A lesson in humility, in awareness, in the importance of seeing people as they are, not as we expect them to be. And that, I realized, was far more powerful than any single acknowledgement or applause. At home that night, I sat quietly, letting the day sink in. The adrenaline had faded, leaving a deep, thoughtful calm. I thought about the people who had doubted me, the assumptions that had been placed on my shoulders, and the courage it had taken just to step forward. And I understood something profound. Courage isn't always loud, and recognition isn't always immediate, but the impact of standing up, of acting truthfully, is timeless. It echoes far beyond the moment, beyond the walls, beyond the people present. And I thought about the broader world, the countless stories of people overlooked, underestimated, or dismissed because of who they are or where they come from. The moments when brilliance is ignored, when courage is questioned, when talent is unseen. And I felt both sorrow and hope. Sorrow because the world often fails to notice these moments, but hope because, when they are recognized, when one person acts, the ripple can change everything. So I ask you, as I sit here telling you this story, how often do we allow assumptions, bias, or pride to blind us to the truth? How many brilliant solutions, bold ideas, and courageous acts have gone unnoticed because we refuse to see them? And how often could we, if we dared to act differently, change someone's life, or even the course of many lives, just by noticing and valuing what's right in front of us? I know now that recognition is not the end. It's the beginning. It's the beginning of change, of awareness, of understanding that everyone has value, everyone has potential, and sometimes it takes just one person willing to see and act to make the impossible happen. And I hope that by telling this story, by sharing what happened that day, others might carry that understanding forward. Because here's the truth. The world can underestimate you, ignore you, even try to hold you back. But your courage,
Your insight and your determination are yours alone. And when you use them, they can create moments that no one can forget. Moments that change everything. Moments like the one I lived. Moments like the one I hope you now see for what it is. A reminder that potential is everywhere, waiting for someone to notice. And as I close this chapter, I leave you with this thought, one that haunts me and drives me every day. What could happen if, even for a single moment, we truly saw people for who they are, not what we expect them to be? How many lives could we change? How many truths could we uncover? And how many times will someone like me, like you, be given the chance to prove the impossible, if only the world would pay attention? I don't know the answer to all those questions, but I do know this. Moments like today, moments of courage, truth, and recognition, are rare. And when they happen, they are powerful enough to shift not just one life, but the entire world around it. And that is a story I will carry with me forever.